Beyond barriers, the $1.60 trillion revolution in Black entrepreneurship. Good morning, everyone. I stand before you today not just as a speaker, but as a messenger of transformation, a transformation that could inject $1.6 trillion into our economy, a transformation that could create 6.3 million new jobs, a transformation that begins with challenging everything you think you know about success, opportunity, and entrepreneurship in America. Today, I'm sharing insights from my profound conversation with Tisha Bishop, a revolutionary economic strategist whose research has fundamentally reshaped how we understand the barriers facing Black entrepreneurs. Tisha isn't just collecting data, she's dismantling myths and rebuilding possibilities. Her work has influenced policy at the highest levels of government and business, creating pathways where only walls existed before. She stands as one of the most powerful voices for economic justice of our generation. Let me start with something that might make you uncomfortable, something that challenges the very foundation of what most of us have been taught about the American dream. We've all heard it, haven't we? That entrepreneurship is the ultimate meritocracy, that good ideas rise to the top, that hard work inevitably leads to success, that if you just hustle harder, network better, pitch more convincingly, the market will reward you. It's a beautiful story. It's a comforting, a thing narrative. And it is fundamentally, catastrophically wrong. What if I told you that the primary barriers Black entrepreneurs face have almost nothing to do with their ideas, their work ethic, or their determination, and everything to do with systemic financial hurdles and access gaps that artificially restrict their growth? This isn't speculation, this is reality. Black owned businesses are systematically denied the oxygen needed to grow capital. Between 2017 and 2025, approval rates for loans among Black owned businesses increased from around 4% to only 6.5%. Think about that for a moment. In nearly a decade of supposed progress, we moved the needle just 2.5 percentage points. At this pace, it would take over 100 years to reach parity. Many Black entrepreneurs don't even apply for loans anymore, not because they lack viable ideas, but because they've internalized the expectation of rejection. Nearly two-thirds cite poor financial positions rooted in broader economic disparities that trace back through generations of systemic exclusion. This isn't about individual shortcomings. This is about a system designed with built in barriers. But here's where the story shifts from tragedy to opportunity. If these approval gaps were closed and Black employer businesses reached population parity, our economy would see up to 757,000 new businesses and 6.3 million more jobs. That's not just an improvement for Black Americans. That's a $1.6 trillion revolution for our entire economy. We're not talking about charity. We're talking about removing artificial constraints on human potential and economic growth. We're talking about unleashing innovation that benefits everyone. During our conversation, Tisha emphasized three critical insights that transform how we understand this issue. First, systemic barriers persist. The journey for Black entrepreneurs is shaped by compounding challenges that go beyond personal effort or business acumen. These aren't occasional obstacles, they're structural impediments built into our financial systems, our networks, and our institutions. Second, representation matters, but it isn't enough. While there's been progress, women now lead 11% of Fortune 500 companies. The pace remains glacial for both women and especially Black professionals at the highest levels. Third, closing these opportunity gaps will create a collective economic impact that extends far beyond individual success stories. It would catalyze millions of jobs and inject billions into local economies, benefiting everyone, regardless of race. Let me bring these abstract concepts into human focus. Meet the Sunda Brown Duckett, who became CEO of TIA in 2021, making her one of only two Black female CEOs currently leading a Fortune 500 company. Her achievement is both remarkable and troubling. Remarkable in its rarity, troubling for the same reason. Duckett navigated an industry dominated by white male leaders and faced intense scrutiny over every decision due to her unique position. Rather than simply securing her own success, she focused on creating inclusive leadership development programs and championing initiatives that support minority talent pipelines. Under her leadership, TIAA has maintained strong financial performance while expanding its diversity efforts across all levels. She rose through banking ranks at JP Morgan Chase before joining TIA, and her career exemplifies resilience against systemic odds. Duckett has led major product launches targeting underserved markets and is recognized as a national voice on closing racial wealth gaps. Her visibility inspires current and future generations while showing corporations what's possible with diverse executive teams. But Duckett's story, inspiring as it is, remains the exception rather than the rule. And that's precisely the point. Now, let's look at the everyday reality of Black entrepreneurship in America. Persistent homeownership and credit score disparities feed into lower business loan approvals, creating a cycle that's nearly impossible to break without institutional change. Some entrepreneurs have turned toward community based lending circles or fintech platforms designed specifically for minority founders. Where alternative funding was accessible, firms reported higher survival rates, but most remained severely undercapitalized compared with their peers. This demonstrates why structural reforms matter more than bootstrapping narratives alone. It's not about working harder. It's about changing the rules of a game that was designed to be unwinnable for too many. The pattern extends globally when we examine women entrepreneurs. Women's startup activity worldwide has grown significantly from an average rate of just over 6% between 2001 and 2005 up to over 10% between 2021 and 2023 across multiple countries. Yet gender gaps persist everywhere, especially pronounced in high income countries like the US, where fewer than 1 in 10 startups is run by a woman despite women making up nearly half the workforce. These challenges compound further when intersecting with race. Fewer than 10% of US based entrepreneurs are Black. Some solutions have emerged. Targeted accelerator programs focus on women and minority founders, expanded mentorship networks connecting established leaders with emerging talent pools. Higher exit rates among VC backed female founded startups suggest significant upside when capital does flow equitably. Global Entrepreneurship Monitor data shows consistent year over year gains driven by policy advocacy plus grassroots support organizations. This proves that intentional investment can rapidly shift representation and hints at even greater potential if racial equity receives equal focus. What these stories collectively reveal is that progress is possible, but it requires intentional, systemic change. It requires us to move beyond individual success stories to address the underlying structures that determine who gets opportunities and who doesn't. The exhaustion many Black entrepreneurs feel isn't just from overextending themselves, it's from pushing against barriers that shouldn't exist in the first place. True rest is impossible when you're constantly swimming upstream. True peace isn't sustainable when the ground beneath you is uneven. As Tisha so eloquently put it during our conversation, we're not asking for special treatment. We're asking for the removal of special obstacles. So, where do we go from here? How do we move from understanding to action? First, we must reject the false narrative that success is purely meritocratic. We must acknowledge that systemic barriers exist and that addressing them benefits everyone, not just those who face them directly. Second, we must support initiatives that expand access to capital for Black entrepreneurs. This means advocating for policy changes, supporting community development financial institutions, and holding traditional lenders accountable for equitable practices. Third, we must recognize that representation matters, but it's not enough. Having a few Black CEOs or successful entrepreneurs doesn't solve structural problems. We need systemic change that creates pathways for many, not exceptions for a few. And finally, we must see this work as collective, not individual. The barriers facing Black entrepreneurs aren't their problem to solve alone. They're our collective challenge as a society that values innovation, economic growth, and human potential. I want to leave you with this question: what if the greatest untapped resource in our economy isn't some undiscovered technology or untapped natural resource, but the systematically suppressed potential of Black entrepreneurship? This isn't just about justice, though justice matters deeply. This is about unlocking $1.6 trillion in economic potential. This is about creating 6.3 million jobs. This is about innovations never realized, problems never solved, and wealth never created. All because we've accepted a system that artificially constrains human potential. Today, I'm challenging you to become architects of a new system. If you're an investor, examine your portfolio. Who's missing? If you're a lender, audit your approval rates across demographics. If you're a business leader, look at your supplier diversity. If you're a policymaker, scrutinize the impact of your policies on underrepresented entrepreneurs. And if you're none of these things, you still have power. You have purchasing power. You have a voice. You have networks and influence that can be directed toward dismantling these barriers. The greatest innovation of our time won't be a new technology, it'll be a new economy, one where talent and determination truly determine outcomes, not race or gender or zip code. One where we've removed the artificial constraints that have held back not just Black entrepreneurs, but our entire economic potential. This is the $1.6 trillion revolution waiting to happen, and it begins with you. Thank you.